The forest camp was supposed to be a fun adventure, a chance to reconnect with nature and escape the monotony of daily life. But as I walked through the dense undergrowth alongside Nick, a lingering unease settled within me. The towering trees loomed overhead, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers, casting elongated shadows on the forest floor. Nick, my companion, seemed unaffected by the eerie atmosphere. He was outgoing and adventurous, always seeking excitement in every situation. But as we ventured deeper into the heart of the forest, my inexplicable fear grew, tightening its grip around my heart like a vice. It was as if the very essence of the forest whispered secrets that sent a chill down my spine. I couldn't understand what scared me, what lay hidden beneath the surface of this seemingly tranquil wilderness. The rustling leaves, the creaking of branches, and the soft hoots of distant owls seemed to conspire against me, heightening my paranoia. Shadows danced and flickered in the dappled sunlight, their movements unnerving. My senses were on high alert, every crack of a twig or hushed breeze causing me to startle. Nick noticed my unease, concern etched on his face. "Hey, are you all right? You seem on edge." I tried to shrug it off, to convince myself that it was all in my head, but the inexplicable fear continued to gnaw at me, refusing to be ignored. "I don't know, Nick. There's something about this place. I can't put my finger on it, but it feels off." He studied me for a moment before nodding in understanding. "I get it. Sometimes our instincts pick up on things we can't consciously perceive. Just stay close, and we'll make it through together, eh?" We pressed on, navigating through the thick underbrush, each step carrying a weight of uncertainty. The forest seemed to shift and transform around us, its serenity a deceptive mask for the lurking terror that eluded comprehension. As dusk approached, the shadows deepened, weaving a tapestry of darkness that enveloped us. The forest became an impenetrable maze, disorienting and overwhelming. Time lost its meaning, and the rustling of leaves grew louder, echoing through my mind. Suddenly, a bone-chilling howl shattered the stillness. It was not the cry of a wolf or any known creature, but something primal and otherworldly. My heart thundered in my chest, threatening to burst from the sheer terror that gripped me. Nick's eyes widened, mirroring the fear etched on my face. "We need to get out of here, now!" We sprinted through the forest, branches clawing at our skin, roots threatening to trip us at every turn. The forest seemed to conspire against us as if it resented our intrusion. The air grew thick with an oppressive energy, suffocating and malevolent. Finally, we burst through the tree line, gasping for breath as we stumbled into an open meadow. The forest loomed behind us, a wall of darkness that beckoned, yet we dared not look back. Collapsed on the grass, adrenaline coursing through our veins, we exchanged a glance of bewildered relief. We had escaped, but the fear still clung to us, haunting our thoughts and leaving us with more questions than answers. To this day, I cannot fathom what truly scared me in that forest. There were no ghosts or monsters, no tangible threats that I could point to. It was an inexplicable fear, an intangible presence that seemed to defy explanation. Was it the ancient whispers of the trees, the primal instincts within me sensing an unseen danger, or something far more sinister lurking within the depths of the forest? Days turned into weeks, and the memory of that harrowing experience refused to fade. It haunted my dreams, its tendrils reaching into my waking hours. I found myself constantly glancing over my shoulder, as if expecting the forest's unseen eyes to follow my every move. I researched local legends, delved into folklore, and consulted experts, desperate for answers that would help me understand the inexplicable fear that had gripped me. Yet all my efforts yielded no concrete explanations, no definitive reasons for the dread that had consumed me. As time passed, the memory of that forest camp began to fade into the background, but the fear it had instilled remained etched within me. It had become a part of my being, a constant reminder that there are forces beyond our comprehension, lurking just beneath the surface of our perceived reality. I had agreed to stay behind for additional lessons with a fellow student, a quiet and unassuming classmate named Ethan. He had always been diligent and studious, a reliable partner for group projects. But tonight, as I made my way to our designated classroom, an inexplicable fear began to gnaw at the pit of my stomach. The halls that had once felt safe and familiar now felt like a labyrinth of foreboding. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant hum of the air conditioning system. Each creak and whisper seemed to magnify, as if the building itself held secrets I was not meant to uncover. As I entered the empty classroom, a chill ran down my spine. The air felt heavy, charged with an energy that sent shivers racing along my arms. The dim lighting cast eerie shadows across the desks, distorting their shapes into grotesque figures that seemed to taunt and leer at me. Ethan sat at the far end of the room, his back hunched over a textbook. His presence should have been a comfort, a familiar face in this unsettling environment. Yet, as I approached him, the feeling of unease intensified, gripping me like icy fingers around my throat. I couldn't pinpoint the source of my fear. Was it a primal instinct warning me of danger, or was it merely my own imagination running wild? I forced a smile, attempting to hide the unease that threatened to consume me. "Hey, Ethan, ready for our study session?" He looked up, his gaze piercing, and for a moment I could swear there was a flicker of something unfamiliar in his eyes, but it was gone as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by a polite smile. "Of course. Let's get started." As we delved into our studies, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The silence hung heavy between us, broken only by the scratching of pencils on paper. The atmosphere in the room grew increasingly suffocating, as if the very walls were closing in around us. Time seemed to stretch, minutes blending into hours as we worked diligently. But my mind was not fully focused on the material at hand. Instead, it was preoccupied with the unexplained fear that gripped me, tightening its hold with every passing moment. The sound of a distant door creaking open shattered the silence, causing my heart to skip a beat. I glanced towards the source of the noise, expecting to see a teacher or another student, but the hallway beyond was empty, swallowed by darkness. Ethan looked up from his book, his expression unreadable. "Did you hear that?" I nodded, my voice barely a whisper. "Yeah, I thought someone had entered the building." A shiver ran down my spine as a sense of dread settled over me like a thick fog. The fear had reached its peak, suffusing the room with an unbearable tension. And yet, there was no tangible threat, no visible danger. We exchanged nervous glances, a silent understanding passing between us. The air grew heavy with an unspoken truth. We were not alone. Something unseen lingered in the shadows, a presence that eluded our comprehension. As the minutes dragged on, the weight of that inexplicable fear grew unbearable. My hands trembled, and a cold sweat formed on my brow. I could no longer ignore the palpable sense of unease that permeated the room, seeping into my very bones. Ethan rose from his seat, his movements cautious, yet determined. "We should go," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "There's something not right here." I nodded in agreement, unable to find my voice. We packed our bags hastily, the urgency in our movements betraying the dread that consumed us. As we made our way toward the exit, a feeling of being watched intensified, as if unseen eyes followed our every step. With each passing moment, the fear clung to me, squeezing tighter, robbing me of reason. We quickened our pace, desperate to escape the suffocating atmosphere that had swallowed the school. The distant sound of footsteps echoed behind us, a chilling reminder that we were not alone. We reached the exit, relief washing over us like a fleeting respite. But as the heavy doors swung open, revealing the outside world, a gust of wind extinguished the nearby streetlights, plunging the surroundings into darkness. Panic surged through my veins, and I stumbled backward, my heart pounding in my chest. Ethan grabbed my arm, his voice laced with urgency. "Keep moving! Don't look back!" Together, we sprinted into the night, the school building disappearing behind us in the abyss. The streets, usually filled with life and activity, were deserted, adding to the sense of isolation and dread that clung to us. We ran until our lungs burned and our legs threatened to give way. Finally, we collapsed onto a nearby park bench, gasping for breath, our bodies trembling with a mixture of exhaustion and lingering fear. I walked alongside him, my footsteps echoing through the dimly lit underground parking lot. It was a place where security cameras watched our every move, yet an inexplicable fear had settled within me, making my skin crawl. As we ventured deeper into the labyrinth of concrete pillars and parked vehicles, a sense of unease gnawed at my insides. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant hum of the ventilation system and the occasional distant rumble of a passing car. My heart raced, beating like a trapped bird, desperate to escape its cage. I stole a glance at my companion, a man I barely knew, but who had insisted on accompanying me to my car. His face was unreadable, hidden beneath the shadowed brim of his hat. The harsh light of the overhead fixtures glinted off his eyes, leaving them hollow and vacant. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. Every step we took felt like a descent into a deeper layer of darkness, into a realm where the rules of logic and reason began to crumble. It was a place where shadows seemed to twist and contort, elongating and stretching out towards us as if they were living entities, hungry and malevolent. I tried to rationalize my fear, to find some... Perhaps it was the isolation of the underground parking lot, the knowledge that we were completely cut off from the outside world. Or maybe it was the knowledge that we were vulnerable in this enclosed space, surrounded by walls that held secrets and concealed potential dangers. But deep down, I knew there was something more, something beyond the tangible and rational. It was a feeling, a presence that whispered in the depths of my mind, urging me to run, to flee from the darkness that threatened to consume me whole. I couldn't put my finger on it, couldn't name the source of my terror, but it was there, lurking in the shadows, just out of reach of my understanding. With each passing moment, the fear intensified, growing into a cacophony of dread that drowned out all rational thought. My breath came in short, shallow gasps, my palms clammy and slick. I wanted to scream, to break free from this claustrophobic nightmare, but the words caught in my throat, strangled by the unseen force that had gripped me. Finally, we reached my car, a small beacon of safety amidst the oppressive darkness. I fumbled with my keys, my hands trembling uncontrollably. As the door unlocked with a satisfying click, I hastily climbed inside, the sanctuary of my vehicle providing a brief respite from the suffocating terror that had plagued me. I glanced up one last time, catching a glimpse of the man who had walked with me through the underground parking lot. His figure was silhouetted against the dim light, his hat pulled low over his face. And in that moment, as our eyes met for a fleeting second, I saw it. The same inexplicable fear reflected back at me. Without a word, he turned and disappeared into the darkness, leaving me with a lingering sense of dread and an unanswered question. What had we both sensed in that underground maze of concrete and shadows? What had caused our shared terror?